that I filed a CDP hearing with requesting an offer in compromise. And from the appeals officer, they say that they don't really talk to the OIC unit until the recommendation comes back to them. So I think it matters. I don't know if the person is trying to do a dual track where, because normally if you send it to an IRS appeals officer and your request is an offer in compromise, they ship it out. My experience is that they just go ahead and ship it out to the OIC unit. They stop working the case. They wait to hear back from the OIC unit for the OIC's, the examiner's determination. And then based upon that, they'll let you know what their answer is. So I don't know if you're just dealing with the appeals officer requesting C&C and then simultaneously also sending an offer and compromise in. That may maybe garner a different result, but I don't think that I really don't think the appeals office, you got to think about it, has probably 300 cases on their desk. So if they're not going to work the case like simultaneously and look at it while the offer unit is looking at it too.
Great. Okay, well, so now we're going to move along a little further in our process here. And so I have a question regarding actually being in the CDP hearing. If you are in a CDP hearing with a post-deficiency assessment where supervisory approval wasn't raised before, must the settlement officer nonetheless verify it? What if the deficiency is from a tax court case where the issue wasn't raised?
I think those are different questions depending upon whether it was assessed without a tax court decision or after a tax court decision. There is actually a case that just came out in January, Laidlaw's Harley-Davidson Sales, which is it's 154 Tax Court number four, yes. And it's docket number 14616-14 if you want to look it up on the tax court website. And that situation involved an assessment of a reportable transaction penalty. The reportable transaction penalty is not subject to deficiency procedures, so it was assessed. And the court actually initially said, wait a second, we're not going to accept your challenge to the liability itself. But the settlement officer was required to verify the procedures and did not verify that it had properly been approved. So in a situation like that, I think the answer is yes, you definitely can bring that up. If you have had a tax court decision, though, I think that probably the general rule of tax litigation applies. Once a court rules on something, it's going to be damn near impossible to get it overturned.
Okay, great. So then the next question is sort of follows that then. So do you have to cite? Do you have a cite to a decision where the court permitted a challenge to the underlying liability, where the taxpayers had an opportunity to appeals but didn't take it?
I'm trying to recall if Laidlaw involved that or not. That's the one that came to mind, but I don't recall if it went through appeals first. It did go to tax court. I'm sorry, it did go to the CDP hearing. I'm flipping through it now and seeing if it was ever put to. Yes, in that case, there was an appeals officer who heard the protest of the penalty and closed the case and recommended assessment. The IRS acted on assessment, so they actually had gone to appeals, and the settlement officer did not verify procedures, and the tax court kicked it back and said you were supposed to have done that, and you did not.
Okay. Very good. And I think this is a question about that can be open to anybody. Thank you, Bob, for all of your answers. But what type of documentation do you request from the CDP officer to confirm the penalties were properly approved? I'm sorry, panel, I'll read that question again.
Yes.
What type of... Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, the question is, what type of documentation do you request from the CDP officer to confirm the penalties were properly approved?
That is still developing. This is a rapidly moving area of the law, and I've seen electronic signatures on various forms that the IRS uses to do that. But basically, the key point is usually finding not what manner was that approval given. It needs to be in writing rather than verbal, but identifying at what point that approval had to be given, which is beginning to coalesce around the date of the 30-day letter.
Great. And another question about... Oops.
Go
ahead.
I can kind of piggyback off of what John said. I think one of the things that's helpful when you first get a case is that you do the FOIA request. And the FOIA request, you can see, it'll give you more insight on what happened in the file. You'll get a complete administrative file, and then you can go through and see how the penalties were assessed and whether or not it was approved. The challenge that you have is that you don't know when you're getting this case and how quickly it takes to get the FOIA file back, right? So I think your best resource is definitely going to be trying to get the FOIA file as soon as you get the case. And as far as a revenue, requesting from a revenue officer, what I like to do probably for that question is just see if I can get the answer to that and just follow up with whoever asked that question to see if there's some other means through the revenue officer to get it.
Okay, great. Well, we are winding down here. I think certainly we've had some very excellent questions, and I'm sorry that we can't answer all of them on the webinar, but I think we might be able to respond to you directly. So I guess one last question would be, which is really for everybody, is what is the suggested procedure to follow when one encounters a surly IRS representative by telephone? I think that's a nice way to end this conversation. And Bev, I think you had this experience earlier today.
Oh my gosh, I had this experience earlier this morning. First call I got this morning, this IRS agent just went off on me. And I had to, one of the things when I'm working with people, I try to bring them back around. And the funny thing is, the good thing is I said I meditated this morning. And so I'm always trying to rework her back into a position of calmness. So I said, look, let's start this conversation again, because I don't understand why you're so upset with me, but let's start it again. And I said that at least 3 times throughout the conversation. So I think part of it is that you have to remain calm when you're talking to them, because you don't know what other outside issues is going on with that person. That's one thing. The other thing is I try to do is, you can always get their manager's information and call the manager and say, hey, this IRS, I'm just having some difficulty with, this agent. You can call the manager. That's going to put you in a combative relationship now, so you have to balance that. And then the third thing I try to do is, if I have a agent that I may not be getting along with, is that I do a heavy paper trail. I write down everything, and I send letters just to back up the conversation. And, I always try to mention the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, because even if you don't like me, my job is to really advocate for the taxpayer. And I even said to the agent today, hey, you know what, I don't know, I feel like my client is about to be biased now if I continue with you. and we were able to come to some resolution that she wasn't going to bias my client. She just needed to get whatever she wanted